Hi everybody. In the previous video, we learned the essential process of submitting and capturing input. In today's video, we will learn how to interact with the database using Django Models. A model can be seen as a table which allows us to let users create, read, update, and delete content in our database. We create the table in our project and choose the fields and data types we need. And we copy the table in the actual database by the migrations command. Let's start our virtual environment and cd into our project folder. But as an exception, we are not going to start our development server yet, as creating or changing models without making the migrations will only cause server errors. Before we create our user model, we will first create a model for our input form to show how Django makes something very complex very easy. We open the editor, and in our Accounts app we have the file, models.py. We already added the model as preparation, but the first line was already added by Django. Here, we import models from the Django Database toolbox. Now on to our code to create and define a model. The first line is a statement. Please note the colon after the statement and the new rule and tab within the statement. When creating models, we need to use classes instead of definitions. A class can be seen as a template for our model, while the model itself can be seen as a table. You can name your model how you want, but it needs to be unique in your project. To stay consistent with our user input form, we named ours user input, but with capitals in it. This activates the model from the Models toolbox. Now on to the details of our table. This is the name of the field in our table. Free to choose, but we like to have some consistency in the namings. Next, we will import the charfield data type from our Models toolbox. The char field will allow storage of characters. We will give the field a maximum of characters it can store by defining maximum length. And lastly, we will allow the field to be blank in our database. We will not register blank input in our task, but we will allow it in the database. Done. Our table is created, but we can't use it yet as a copy is still to be made in our actual database. For that we have to make migrations, so let's go back to our command prompt. We need to execute two commands for this. The first one is Python manage.py, make migrations accounts. This is the preparational step. The second step is the migration itself. We do this with the command Python manage.py, migrate accounts. Migration confirmed OK. From now on we can perform tasks on our model in our views. So let's go to our views to check the 3 lines of code we added to our homepage task. But first, we need to import our UserInput model from within our Accounts app. Our code is the same as in our previous video, except that we will create a record of the user input, in case the request is a post, and the input is not empty. Please consider an object nothing more than a record in our table. First we write the name of the model which we need. In this case, our UserInput model. And we indicate that we want to create an object, AK record, in our model, AK table. And we will store the user's input, captured in our original post request, in the database in the field with a matching field name. See the connection? Note that we stored the creation in a variable obj, but we won't use this variable anymore as we already have the current input in our context box. And lastly, in all our scenarios, as added on the same indentation as the eval statement, and last in the task, we will request a list of all the records ever created in our model. We do this by calling the model.objects.all and empty brackets. We store the results in a variable, UserOutput. And then we will store this variable in a new context box. You can create as many context boxes as you want, as long as you call them in your template with the correct name. We will add both of our context boxes as context to our return. Now we need to add some code in our homepage HTML file in order for us to see the output in our browser. So let's go to our templates folder to our HTML file. We already added the code as preparation. As we still want to see the current input from the user, we call the corresponding context box with the Django data output tag. Then 2br tags for next lines. And now 3 newly added lines of code. As the user output context box is actually a list of items, we can iterate over the list with the Django template tag, for. As this is functional code, we don't use double accolades, instead we have to use a single accolade and percentage. Also, a for tag has to be closed with an and for tag. Django rules. Mind the accolade and percentage. We read the code as follows. For each item in the user output list, the name item is freely chosen. It acts as a variable that will temporarily contain the record of each iteration. And for each item it finds, it will show the content that our record contains. We obtain it by adding the field name to the item with a dot. You see the connections? We are finished and ready to test our application. As always, don't forget to save your work. Now we start our development server. Everybody following the tutorial should know the command very well by now. Python manage.py run server. And we go to our browser and enter the server's address. As the database is new and empty, as expected, we only see our standard message. Let's submit the first characters. We see the user's input and our database output. This is excellent. Same for our second submit. And the next. And as you see, it works perfect for every submit. We always see the last submit and the full database list of submits. A refresh and an empty submit should give our standard messages without changing the output data. Works fine. Also, our links still work fine. With only a few lines of code, we made our application microdynamic. While we will perform many tasks with our models in the future, the process is basically always the same. So take some time to make sense of it. We will now delete our UserInput model as it served its purpose showing the basics of Django models. And confirm the delete with a migration. And deleted. Let's go to Views and delete the tasks we performed on our model. First, we delete the import. Then we delete the line where we created objects of the model. Then the 2 lines where we collect all the objects and store them in context. Let's also delete the code on our HTML homepage. Don't forget to save your work. Lastly, we need to do the migrations in the command prompt. First, quit the server. Then make the migrations as preparation with Python manage.py make migrations accounts. Now the actual migrations with Python manage.py migrate accounts. The delete model migration is confirmed OK. But let's restart the development server to see if we made any errors elsewhere. No errors. And as expected, we have no database output anymore as we have deleted our model and all the code used for it. We will now create our user model. We will close the browser and the command prompt and grab our code. Hold on. This is our user model, a big model, but in our opinion not so difficult to understand. As the user model contains authentication functionalities, we can't use a standard model for that. Instead, we use the abstract user model. There are different user models to choose from. We like working with the abstract user model as it provides a lot of flexibility to add a wide variation of data types. The first line is our statement. Please note the colon after the statement and new rule and tab within the statement. We use a class which will serve as a template for our model which we named user. And it will have the structure and functionalities of the abstract user model. This model has some integrated fields like username, password, and some more. So we don't have to add these fields anymore, we can access them by using their names. The email field is also integrated in the abstract user model, but as we want to overwrite its maximum length and allowing it to be a blank field, which is not the case in the standard setting, we have to add the field in order to do that. Please note that we can't add user underscore like we did for all our other fields, as we have to use the exact name that Django gave to this field, which is email. Check the data type we used from the Models toolbox. The following block of fields is almost self-explanatory. We have a user profile picture field, a user occupation field, a user country and city field, a bio field, and 2 social link fields. Please check the data types we used for our fields. For the profile picture image field, we assign a default profile picture, which we will add to our folder later. But also allows the field to be empty. And we assign the profile pictures folder to store the pictures uploaded by users. Oops. Do you see the mistake? We will correct the folder name in our model after the video. Check the data types we used and some settings we changed. Wherever we can, we will set blank allowed to true. This to give the user choices. Next, we added 2 fields from the type datetime field. But with different settings, one to see the creation date and one to see the last update date. Now comes a block of complex fields that will help us with the follow, unfollow, and block functionalities. Let us try to explain them. As these functionalities require a link to other users, we have to use a special kind of data type that allows this. The many-to-many field. This field allows a user to be followed by many, but also that the user can follow many in return. This field is bidirectional, meaning that we can access the list of users following the current user by using the field's name, user_followers. But also the list of the users that the current user is following, by using the related name. Note that for this data type, we also have to make a reference to the user model, which is our own model that will be used by all registered users of the application. In correct terms, every user will be an object of this one model. The same logic applies to the blocking functionality. The many-to-many field allows that a user blocks many, but also that a user can be blocked by many in return. We can access both lists of the users by the field name or related name. Hopefully that made some sense. If not, give it some time, we will get there with some practice. The following field will help us counting the likes a user receives for submitted content. Check the data type used. Every user starts with 0 likes, so we set the default on 0. Next is a big block of Boolean fields. A Boolean field can either be yes or no. So they can help us a lot with remembering user settings and preferences. Example. Suppose you designed your website with 2 color schemes. A light and dark one, with the light one being the default. With a Boolean field, you can create a choice button so that a user can set the dark color scheme as default true. In that way, the user will always see his or her color preference when signed in. In our opinion, you can better have too many Booleans in your user model than having not enough. In case ideas evolve, they might prove useful. We have booleans to give users choices to display, or not, some personal information about themselves. But also if they have notifications, or public or private events pending. And some confirmation booleans to give the users a confirmation choice whenever blocking other users or whenever deleting their own account. In a later stage of our project, we might want to look for adding extra features like a rewarding functionality where payment gateway integration will be needed. So to anticipate, we added some fields. No need to go in detail of these, just check the data types used to learn about the variation the toolbox has at its disposal. And lastly, within a model class we can create tasks. Mind the indentation, same level of the fields. The first task always has to be added to each model you create. The task defined is to show a default model field every time the model is inquired without providing a field name for the output. It's a Django self-function, meaning it will search within its own model. For our user model we chose to show the username field as default output. The second task we created ourselves. We tell Django to look within the own model and return the total amount of followers for the user. You will later see how easy we can access the output of this task elsewhere in our project. Note that the count empty brackets is a function that can only be used on model fields that have a reference to the user model. In our case, these are the many-to-many fields. Django will keep count on them by itself and we can access the number with the count function. For a field like user hearts received, we will have to do the math ourselves in our view tasks. We will learn all about it later on. Done. Our user model is as complete as we could get it for our current project plan. Before we can do the migrations, we need to do two more things. See the image field data type used for the user profile picture? For Django to be able to work with this data type, we need to install Pillow. We will do so with the command pip install Pillow. And last, we need to add a reference to our user model in our settings file. So let's do this first. We go to the project folder and into the settings file. And scroll down to the authentication settings. And here we add the reference to our user model in our Accounts app. Saving our work. Now we go to the command prompt. cd into our P1 folder to start the virtual environment. And in our virtual environment folder, P1, we will install Pillow with pip install Pillow. And with pip freeze, we check if Pillow is correctly installed. Looks good. Now we can start the migrations. cd into your project folder. And write the command python manage.py make migrations. This time we won't specify the Accounts app. And there is an important reason for that. The project itself also has migrations which include authentication functions. If you do these before you migrate the user model, you will end up with database issues. Therefore, it's highly recommended to create the user model at the start of the project and migrate it together with the project migrations. Or to specify the app in order to target particular models. Let's enter the command. Preparations confirmed OK. Now the actual migrations with Python manage.py migrate. All migrations confirmed OK, including the project migrations. Now let's run the development server again to see if we made errors elsewhere. Opening our browser. All still looks good. And we have our important user model ready to use in our project. This was it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in and we hope to see you in the next video.